Hi, I'm Terence Komal. Much has been said in recent days about the controversies and the concerns around the delays of the rollout of vaccines in South Africa. Many have asked, but has government made a wise decision? Will the current vaccines at least not create some immunity? Others have asked, why the change of supplier? Others have asked, has government actually missed something and what exactly is going on? In my view, based on the recent discussions and in conversations with some of our leading colleagues and experts, I've learned to understand that the decision was made on the latest science, and that's a critical aspect. Because a recent trial in South Africa had confirmed that the AstraZeneca vaccine may work according to the international data, but based on the South African strain or the mutation, what is known as the N501Y.V2 mutation of the coronavirus, there are critical concerns of its efficacy in South Africa. Now, let's ask ourselves, what does that actually mean? Well, based on the trial and the data that's become available, in mild cases, there's been limited benefit. There's been limited benefit for using the AstraZeneca vaccine in its current form. And that is a critical concern for our country. Because if one were to extrapolate and look beyond what that actually means, it then actually means more severe cases and hospitalized cases could have less benefit or there could be less benefit for patients who reach that stage after having the vaccination, which is a major concern for South Africa. There has been some pushback by the lead scientist behind the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine saying, well, it will give you some immunity. But is that enough? The view in South Africa between my peers and I, and the leading scientists at the front of this discussion, is that we don't think it's enough at this stage. Because we cannot vaccinate people to create the impression that you've built a certain level of immunity to contribute to the herd immunity that we intend to achieve in this country as well as around the world. Is there an alternative? Well, based on the data that we have at the moment and conversations that's at the forefront, which many of you have been listening to, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine seems to be more promising. The reason for that is the trial was done primarily in South Africa, or at least a large portion of it was done in South Africa, with the mutated virus being prevalent in the country. According to leading scientists in South Africa, the volume of the mutated virus at this stage is more than 80%, which means we need a vaccine that works for the current strain in South Africa. There have been conversations, and I spoke to some colleagues yesterday of saying, well, how does this impact the rollout of the AstraZeneca vaccine in other countries and around the world? I believe that is their decision to make because they will understand what is their disease burden, what is the impact of the coronavirus and the mutations in their local populations in their countries. And that's a decision they need to make. What we're doing in South Africa is something those countries, I'm certain, are doing also, is bringing a mix of vaccines. Because at this stage, there is no perfect answer. Some vaccines may work and some may not. But because of the time it takes to research, develop, produce, and distribute these vaccines, there are critical time losses in between. And that is where a mix of vaccines makes a hell of a lot of sense. So therefore, I agree that the delay may be unfair to many. It is something that many felt is unanticipated, but I think, is best case and is really fair to the communities, starting with high-risk patients, high-risk communities, frontline healthcare workers, and those directly involved of care of patients, because we need a vaccine that gives us not just peace of mind, but good immunity, or at least a large immunity, to resist severe infection, resist severe disease, and build that immunity so that we can continue to fight as a country, continue to fight as a community and as a world, so that we know the vaccine adds value. Is it the only weapon in our arsenal against the COVID vaccine? I don't think so. I think we still go back to the same basics. And many of us, many of you, and many of people that I know are also frustrated and tired that every time you hear a solution, people say, sanitize, socially distance, wear your mask appropriately, covering your mouth and your nose. But it is the reality. Because even if you were to get a vaccine today, let's assume for a moment you got the vaccine today. That would boost your immunity. That means your body gets ready to respond to an infection. But it does not mean you won't get the infection. which means you could be a carrier. You could be passing the infection. You could be sharing the infection to those near and dear and those you come into contact with. And that is something that's not going to change. It's very much, if we were to look at the example of the common flu, as we call it, the influenza vaccine that we get annually, or most people should or do take annually. Why do we take a vaccine every year? It's because of the mutation of the virus. And that's exactly what's happened in the coronavirus. The mutation happened, and we need to get a new vaccine that works to the new mutation. And that is critical. And that is exactly why you cannot say, I took a flu vaccine last year or a few years ago and it should work because my immune system is ready. It's ready for the strain that your body had at that stage, not for the new mutation and not the new strain. And that's what we need to keep in mind. So when we go back to basics, of how it impacts you, how it impacts me, how it impacts our kids, our parents, our families, our near and dear, and our loved ones, the basics will still apply. Whether we get the vaccine in the next week or two, or in 2 months or 3 months down the line, it will ease the burden on the system, but it will not ease the burden on you and I in taking responsible decisions to limit transmission across the community, across the country, and across the world. Please stay safe and stay well, and all the best.